Yeah. As is stated, every time a group of folks like this gets together over something political, the 3rd legislative district is the absolute poorest district in the state. And therefore we have a huge number of our population that is dependent on basic health services from the state. If you folks could explain to us how you would maintain that system, or if you would not maintain it, what you would do to replace it, I would be interested in hearing that.
Okay, and we'll start with Morgan.
Yes, the state does have a responsibility to protect the vulnerable citizens. The best thing we can do to make what Louise was saying, to make us that we're not the poorest district in the state, is to raise the bottom. This was John Kennedy's policy. It was Ronald Reagan's policy. It is bringing the bottom up. The rising tide lifts all boats. We do that. We pursue substantive tax reform that gives everyone who wants a job the opportunity to get a job. We're going to reduce the need for the services so we can provide better services to those who really need it at a lower cost. That's how I would address this issue, that we can keep the programs that are working in place. We just need to reduce the need for those programs. So raise the standard of living, create opportunity for individuals, and the burden, the budget problems will go down, the burden on these agencies will go down. That's what I'll advocate for.
Representative Rosen?
So, basic health, critical state program. And I would just like to add, there's been a lot of national controversy over this national health care reform. And I would just like to congratulate you on your question, signifying how important it is, because it ended up being key components of our state basic health program that were basically became part of what the national health reform became. And I think that it was recognized by key leaders that Washington State took a lead on basic health, and that we provided affordable health care for working folks, working poor, that made too much money to qualify for Medicaid, but not enough to actually access health care. It's a critical program. So let's go back to that whole $12 billion and just boil it down to that $12 problem. That 80 cents that we did in taxes did a couple things. It preserved 2 critical programs. It preserved basic health because when we went into this legislative session, it was being suggested by many in the minority party that we get rid of it. We can't afford it. Well, I know that the people who were getting basic health couldn't afford health coverage. And so that was something that I really fought to maintain, was maintaining basic health. It was also on the chopping block that we get rid of GAU, which was General Assistance Unemployable. It's $359 a month to folks that would not otherwise have any income at all. Basically, they have to have a protective payee. They have to, $359 a month for a single individual to be able to eat, shelter, and provide for their basic needs. It's not very much money. And that 80 cents kept those 2 programs in play, and what we need to do is figure out a way to provide that floor of our expectation, which is access to health care for people that work that don't make enough money to pay for it.
I think this state owes its citizens not only decent health care, but it owes them a quality of life they can't achieve in other states. I want to be superior to other states. I want to lead the way. I know in Alaska they get a stipend from their oil every year. We don't get that here, so why can't we, if we are successful, if we build our economy and say we become the #1 leader of hemp rope or textiles, or we're making a ton of paper with it, why can't that money go to fund state health care, and not just state health care, but state programs? We owe the highest quality of dedication from our legislatures to our citizens. If we're not doing that, then we're not doing our job.
Thank you. Another question.
Okay, Matt Shea has introduced some bills to protect the 10th Amendment of our Constitution. For an example, if the Obamacare health care is going to be imposed on us, which would require that we buy the government-approved health care, otherwise get in trouble, and he created more IRS agents to
I think I skipped Hector going around the last time, so we'll start with Hector this time.
Well, what we could do as a state is we could withhold the taxes that we pay to the federal government in that lawsuit so that they will be forced to come out and present their case in our state. I think this whole thing with them suing Arizona, the federal government's gotten out of control. It's out of control. Right now, the gun initiative that just got knocked down in the Supreme Court came out of Chicago also. So there's a lot of stuff coming out of Chicago, and unfortunately, the Supreme Court that they just brought on, if she was on there 2 weeks ago, none of you would be able to have a handgun in your home. I'll tell you that straight up right now. So you could not protect yourselves. So I'm against any federal health care program.
Laura, I think are you asking about the tax escrow accounts that some people have proposed?
Well, there were several initiatives that Matt Shea, I think, wanted, like the 10th Amendment, like the 10th Amendment, well, there's a whole list of initiatives, like Sheriff First, no Obamacare if we don't want it, and so forth, or let the people decide on it.
I think, yeah, and one issue that Matt has done is that the tax escrow account, and I think that'd be an idea worth exploring, where our federal tax dollars are held in the state until April 14th, and then we say we don't just, so it's not just a blank check taken out of everyone's paycheck twice a month, so we don't know. One thing we can do is elect federal officials that believe in a limited federal government. That's one area where we can do that, and we have a chance to do that this November, getting rid of Patty Murray. That's one thing we can do. The next thing is the state legislature can stand up for our state's constitutional rights, and that's why the founders put the 10th Amendment in there, that we can sue the federal government when they overstep their bounds and let the courts decide. That's one option that we can explore. But the best thing to do is through elections and get people that believe in the Constitution, believe in a limited government that does the necessary services that only government can provide, and get out of the way. That's the best way we can do it.
So I'd like to go back to the original constitutional question that the lady asked, and I wanted to assure Morgan that I did pass my high school civics, and we did have constitutional classes in there. But it's not something that I've poured over, because what I know is everyone can have their own interpretation of what the Constitution says. And regardless of whether you know where the punctuation mark is, and if you've ever read it, they had spirit was spelled with an F back then, so it's kind of hard. They had a different, Old English is a little bit different language than the modern English that we use, so it's a little bit of a difficult document to understand in its original form. But I will say about your question, Laura, about the 10th Amendment, I think that Representative Shea has every right to introduce legislation asserting what his belief of the 10th Amendment is. I think that it is up to the legislature to decide the value of that and not take any one person's interpretation for it. That's what this process is about. The one thing that I know about the Constitution is that it empowers the people to have their voice, and that's the most important thing. Now, we can quibble about this word and what does it mean. That is the purview of the courts, and the separation of power, that the exclusive purview of the courts. The legislature can, based on court decisions, clarify what their intent was or make something constitutional. You will see the Washington State Supreme Court say this law as written is not constitutional, but they will give you hints, if the legislature is paying attention, to what you can do to achieve a similar goal, but do it within the confines of the court's interpretation of what's constitutional. I think as many people as are in this room, we could all have different interpretations about the Constitution. It's the court to determine whether or not it is actually constitutional.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Next question.